After their passionate night together, Fu Xinqing quickly got out of bed, sporting a cheerful smile. He informed He Yan that he needed to take a shower and head to the company. He suggested she take some time to rest and gather her strength before visiting her parents. In a fit of annoyance, He Yan flung a pillow at him, but her aim was off, and the pillow ended up hitting the wall. As Fu Xinqing descended the stairs, his lips still curved in a slight smile. His apparent good mood caught Jiang off guard. He examined Fu Xinqing's demeanor carefully and, finding him genuinely cheerful, spoke up. Jiang relayed a message from the family's patriarch, mentioning that the young master would be returning by plane the following afternoon, suggesting that Fu Xinqing consider welcoming him at the airport if he had the time. Fu Xinqing's expression darkened slightly, and he inquired if there were any additional messages from the patriarch. Jiang hesitated for a moment before sharing more of the patriarch's words. The patriarch had emphasized the importance of brotherly love between Fu Xinqing and the young master, highlighting that, as the two male heirs in their generation, they should support each other and not let any misunderstandings linger. Fu Xinqing listened with a half-smile and responded, "Please convey to the patriarch that he can rest assured. I will manage the Fu family matters accordingly, as I have been doing during these past 2 years abroad." Recalling He Yan's recent interaction with the two bodyguards, Fu Xinqing instructed them not to interfere if she decided to leave the apartment soon. He also suggested that they offer her a ride but not insist if she declined. The two bodyguards obediently nodded and assured Fu Xinqing that they understood his instructions. Anticipating that He Yan might leave, Fu Xinqing expected her departure earlier in the day. However, she surprised him by staying until after lunch, choosing not to use the provided transportation. It wasn't until Jiang informed him that He Yan had left his apartment that he considered whether she needed to be followed. Fu Xinqing contemplated the situation for a moment and then decided against tailing her. Instead, he requested that Jiang keep a close eye on the movements of the Chen family and immediately inform him if He Yan attempted to contact them. As Fu Xinqing sat alone at his desk, his mind wandered. He couldn't help but worry that Jiang might knock on the door with news of a mysterious call made to the Chen family, which could potentially implicate He Yan. He knew that He Yan was clever enough not to make such a call personally or use her own phone. Fortunately, Jiang called with reassuring news that there had been no unusual phone activity related to the Chen family. Relieved, Fu Xinqing ended the call and dialed He Yan's number. He Yan finally answered after a prolonged ring, and Fu Xinqing greeted her with a cheerful tone, asking what she was up to. Intentionally keeping her voice low, He Yan replied, "Just helping my mother pack her things. Is there something you need? She'll be coming over shortly." Fu Xinqing chuckled softly, saying, "Nothing in particular, just feeling a bit tired from work and thought I'd chat with you to lighten the mood." He Yan, somewhat annoyed and embarrassed, lowered her voice and called him by his name. Then, her mother's voice could be heard in the background, inquiring about her bank cards. He Yan raised her voice to respond to her mother's question, and after reassuring her mother, she whispered to Fu Xinqing, "I need to help my mother find something now. I'll call you back later. Please don't call me." Fu Xinqing was momentarily taken aback but couldn't help laughing. It appeared that her parents were on track for a smooth departure abroad. The next challenges would be how to transfer sufficient funds to support her parents' overseas life and how to escape from Fu Xinqing's grasp. He Yan had some serious thinking to do. However, her mother interrupted her contemplation by complaining about her lack of assistance with packing. She also inquired about Fu Xinqing's situation and the circumstances at home. He Yan had prepared her responses for these expected questions. She reassured her mother that she would handle everything and suggested that her parents enjoy their trip without any worries. She promised to discuss everything further upon their return. Yan's mother recognized her daughter's resolute nature, which she had exhibited since childhood. Once He Yan made up her mind, it was challenging for outsiders to sway her. Displaying a hint of helplessness on her face, Yan's mother attempted to persuade her daughter. Yan, life is a long journey, not just a fleeting moment of excitement. Yuanze is truly a good match for you. If you let him go, you might regret it later, Yan's mother advised. He Yan responded with a smile, saying, "Mom, Yuanze and I are still friends. Besides, if you're traveling this time, you can contact him. Ask him to show you around for a few days. I'll be at ease knowing he's keeping you company." As she spoke, He Yan suddenly remembered something and added, "Oh, by the way, I have something to give him." Gently caressing the round porcelain doll with her fingers, He Yan continued, "I really like it, and there's another one at Yuanze's place. I thought it would be nice to have a matching pair." Realizing her mistake, she tried to correct herself with a tight smile. "Yuanze cares about me, so I thought it would be a thoughtful gesture to give it to him. You can take it to him for me." Yan's mother couldn't quite grasp her daughter's current preferences, shaking her head in resignation and sighing, "Oh, you young people, you can be quite puzzling." Later that morning, Yan drove her parents to the airport. As they arrived at the terminal, her father offered some parting advice: be sure to stay safe at home and avoid any unnecessary risks. Yan, feeling a bit guilty, replied, "I understand, Dad." Her father's gaze shifted to her wrist, noticing something amiss. "What happened to your wrist?" he inquired. Yan hesitated for a moment, smiling as she explained, "I twisted it while carrying something, but it's healing well." "Don't worry, Dad." She then urged her parents to proceed to the security checkpoint, saying, "You should go through security and wait inside. It will put my mind at ease." Yan gave her mother and father a warm hug before watching them as they disappeared through security. Once they were out of sight, she made her way back to her car. Yan reached for her phone and dialed Fu Xinqing's number. When he picked up, she informed him, "I'm at the airport. I just saw my parents off. Could you arrange for someone to pick me up? I've re-injured my wrist, and driving is a bit inconvenient." "Where are you right now?" Fu Xinqing inquired. "I'm at the airport," Yan replied. Fu Xinqing simply stated, "Wait at the exit. I'll be right there," before ending the call. Yan was a little taken aback. Her initial intention was to subtly show her vulnerability to Fu Xinqing and dissuade him from coming personally. She didn't want to expose herself further. She stood there, contemplating whether to call him back and suggest that he not come in person. However, before she could make a decision, she heard his voice coming from behind her, and she turned to see him approaching. She was surprised to see him in person. She turned around to look at him and asked, "Why are you here?" In all honesty, Yan was a bit flustered. She was afraid that he had come to keep an eye on her, and she was even more concerned that he might have seen her emotional farewell with her parents, which could raise suspicions. Fu Xinqing maintained a serious expression as he carefully removed her wrist guard and unwound the gauze to inspect the wound. After a moment, he relaxed his expression and said, "It's not a major issue. When you get back, call Dr. Wan to take a look." Yan stole a glance at him, noting the lack of any unusual reactions on his face. This reassured her somewhat, and she casually inquired, "Did you come here out of concern, or is there another reason?" Fu Xinqing gently took her hand and replied, "To be honest, I came here to pick someone up today." Yan observed that her parents' flight was nearly ready for departure. She hurriedly suggested, "I'm feeling thirsty. Let's go to the cafeteria." As they walked, she asked him, "Who did you say you were here to pick up?" Fu Xinqing looked at her without reservation and replied, "Fu Suhui." Yan tensed up upon hearing this and immediately recalled Fu Xinqing's unpleasant and cunning cousin. She forced a smile and said, "Well, then, you go ahead. I can take a taxi on my own." Fu Xinqing gazed at her and suddenly asked, "Yan, are you avoiding seeing him?" Yan raised her head, studied his expression for a moment, and replied, "Fu Xinqing, you don't need to doubt me. I'm not afraid of him, nor do I have any history with him. We're unrelated in every way. I just don't want to put you in an awkward position." She mustered a wry smile and continued, "After all, our relationship isn't entirely conventional. We've had our history before. How can you introduce me to Fu Suhui?" Fu Xinqing's lips pressed into a thin line, but it seemed Yan didn't notice. She carried on calmly, "Even among mistresses, there are distinctions. Some can be openly acknowledged, while others remain hidden forever. Fu Xinqing, I know myself very well." With that said, she smiled at him and began to walk away. However, Fu Xinqing wasn't ready to let go, and he grabbed her wrist from behind. Yan smiled to herself. She didn't want to turn back, but Fu Xinqing remained persistent, resulting in a momentary standoff. Just then, a mocking voice filled with a smirk intruded, "Well, what do we have here?" Fu Xinqing hadn't noticed when Fu Suhui had arrived. He stood a short distance away, hands in his pockets, a smug smile playing on his lips as he observed the scene before him. Yan lightly glanced at him, ignored, and only calmly asked Fu Xinqing, "What do you want?" But Fu Xinqing refused to let go. Suhiu asked Fu Xinqing with a smile, "Brother, if I don't admit my mistake, is this Miss Yan? The kind of unclean woman are you still playing with her?" Yan felt Fu Xinqing's hand holding her wrist tight. When he released her hand and wanted to go on Suhiu's face, he quickly grasped Fu Xinqing's shoulders and said, "It's unnecessary. You can send me back quickly." Fu Xinqing didn't budge. He still went close to his brother and said, "You must be tired from the travel. Go back and rest for a few days." Yan exerted a gentle force, pulling him along and guiding him outside. Fu Xinqing was momentarily taken aback, but he complied with her, allowing her to lead him to the parking lot. Once there, they retrieved their car, and as they settled into their seats, He Yen turned to him. "Do you have some free time right now?" she inquired. "If you do, could you accompany me to the supermarket? I haven't bought anything for Chinese New Year yet." He nodded in agreement, and throughout the car ride, they remained in comfortable silence. When the car came to a stop in a parking space, they stepped out of the vehicle. Abruptly, Fu Xinxing halted and whispered to He Yen, "I'm sorry, Yen." She responded with a playful tone, "What for?" He gazed at her intently, admitting, "I apologize for the past, for hurting you. I swear I won't force you again." Yen, following his lead, retorted, "Didn't you promise not to bring up the past again? I told you I'll stay by your side until you get tired of me, so let's forget about it." Fu Xinxing was taken aback by her response. Yen continued with a slight smile, "I have just one request, don't hurt my family, okay?" He held her close and vowed, "I promise you, anything you want." Yen playfully questioned, "Anything?" Fu Xinxing asked, "Yes, what do you want?" She teased him, "Your fate." Fu Xinxing replied with humor, "In bed, is it? Alright, I can give you that." Yen pushed him away, took a few steps, and playfully scolded, "Fu Xinxing, you rascal." Fu Xinxing, now pushing the shopping cart behind He Yen, initially felt awkward. However, as he followed her, he gradually grew more comfortable. He observed her shopping choices and occasionally extended his hand to help her carry the heavier items in the cart. When waiting in line to check out, Fu Xinxing took out several boxes of condoms and solemnly asked her, "Yen, which one do you like?" He Yen got embarrassed and doesn't respond. Fu Xinxing recognized that He Yen was genuinely annoyed, and he didn't want to push her further. He quickly paid for their groceries and chased after her. Outside the store, he caught up to her, taking her arm gently. He Yen turned to look at him and spoke firmly, "Fu Xinxing, you should be aware that some jokes are fun in private, but if taken to public places, they become inappropriate. Do you understand?" His expression dimmed, but he nodded, conceding, "I'll be more careful in the future." They continued pushing the cart in silence. After a few steps, He Yen naturally took his arm. In a hushed voice, she asked him, "Which one did you buy?" Fu Xinxing was amused by her question and turned to whisper in her ear, "The one you like best." With all the bags in hand, Fu Xinxing accompanied He Yen to her apartment. She welcomed him with enthusiasm, saying, "Fu Xinxing, come on in. The room is waiting for you." Ah Jiang offered to help, but Fu Xinxing declined. Once inside the room, Ah Jiang informed him, "Mr. Fu, the master wants to see you." Fu Xinxing excused himself and headed back to the old Fu family house in the outskirts of Nanzhou. It was a large house with white walls. As Fu Xinxing entered from outside, Suhiu greeted him with a wave and said, "Elder brother." However, Fu Xinxing chose to first greet their grandfather, saying, "Grandfather." Old Fu responded, "Sit down." Then, Suhiu casually asked, "Did elder brother send Miss Yen back?" Ignoring Suhiu's question, Fu Xinxing turned to him coldly and asked, "Did you get hurt from being chased and beaten abroad?" Suhiu stood up abruptly, his voice taking on a cruel tone. "Shenjijie." Fu Xinxing lifted his gaze and retorted, "Who are you calling?" Old Fu intervened, stating, "That's enough. I know you two brothers have strong personalities, and you no longer take my old man seriously. But I'll make it clear now. You can fight amongst yourselves at home as much as you want, but when you step outside, you should stand united. If anyone crosses the line, don't blame me for being ruthless." Fu Xinxing's face darkened, and he fell silent. Old Fu continued, "Both of you are getting older. It's time for one of you to inherit the family. It's fine to have fun outside, but those you bring home must be dignified and virtuous. Disorderly women are not allowed." Suhiu couldn't resist adding with a smirk, "Grandpa is absolutely right. We can't let any disorderly women into the house." Without further word, Fu Xinxing stood up and calmly stated, "Grandfather, I have some business to attend to, so I'll take my leave." Old Fu nodded and replied, "Very well." After leaving the house and driving back, Ah Jiang cautiously brought up the matter. "When I returned from the airport, the young master asked about Miss Yen. I didn't say much, but by the look on his face, it seems he's quite interested in this matter. He might inquire about it from others." Fu Xinxing's expression turned slightly serious as he ordered, "Go and speak to Glasses. Tell him to keep his people in check, especially Sister Hua. She needs to be cautious with her words. Don't blabber about it." He also added, "Xiao Wu and Bald Head are there too. Inform them that if any information about the Chen family girl leaks, I will hold them accountable." Ah Jiang nodded, saying, "Understood." Back in the apartment, He Yen was alone in the kitchen, preparing soup. When Fu Xinqing returned, she naturally asked, "Have you eaten? Would you like some soup?" Fu Xinqing ignored her question and inquired, "Has Dr. Wan been here?" He Yan smiled and replied, "He checked it and said it will be fine in a couple of days." A faint, invisible smile played on the corners of Fu Xinqing's lips as he remarked, "Is it inconvenient for me to do things myself? If you want soup in the future, call the nanny to prepare it for you." He Yan nonchalantly responded, "I have plenty of free time. I'm always looking for ways to pass the time." She then scooped a spoonful of soup, offered it to him, and said, "Come on, taste the salt." Fu Xinqing felt warmth in his heart and grinned, "It's delicious." "Really?" He Yan raised an eyebrow skeptically and took another scoop. She tasted it and couldn't help but make a face, quickly reaching for some water to rinse her mouth. She glared at Fu Xinqing and said, "Fu Xinqing, did you grow up eating pig slop?" Fu Xinqing chuckled and admitted, "Pretty much." He Yan was taken aback for a moment and then asked softly, "Did you have a difficult past?" Fu Xinqing sneered, "Yes." Regretfully looking at the pot of soup, He Yan muttered, "What a waste of ingredients." He laughed and approached, hugging her from behind. He spoke softly, "It's all right. I can finish it." He Yan turned to look at him, and he really meant it. She rolled her eyes playfully but then blushed. Fu Xinqing noticed her reaction and couldn't help but lean in to kiss her cheek. Things escalated from there, but just as they were getting carried away, He Yan warned him in a hushed tone, "Fu Xinqing, Ah Jiang is downstairs. He'll see us. Let's go back to the room." When Ah Jiang came upstairs and heard the sweet voices from Fu Xinqing's room, he quickly retreated downstairs. The next morning, He Yan refused to get out of bed until Fu Xinqing urged her, "Get up and call your parents. They should have landed by now." Still lying in bed, He Yan asked sleepily, "What time is it there now?" Fu Xinqing replied without thinking, "It's 2 o'clock in the afternoon." Suddenly alert, He Yan sat up, called her mother, and inquired about her well-being. After a brief conversation, she hung up the phone. Following the call, He Yan told Fu Xinqing, "I still need some more sleep. Arrange a driver for me, please. I want to go shopping." Fu Xinqing smiled and agreed. He Yan knew she had to be cautious as Fu Xinqing's vigilance hadn't diminished. She needed to plan her escape carefully, ensuring there were no flaws that he could detect. While Fu Xinqing was in his office, Ah Jiang brought him a message, saying, "This is from the young Chen family girl to police officer Zhang." Fu Xinqing opened it and found a New Year's card along with the white paper bearing his fingerprints. Fu Xinqing asked Ah Jiang, "Are you sure you didn't leave any traces?" Ah Jiang shook his head, replying, "I had someone snatch the mail when the recipient wasn't looking. No one saw it." Fu Xinqing nodded in approval, handed the card and the documents back to Ah Jiang, and instructed, "Go and insert your fingerprint on it. Also, copy Chen Hegua's handwriting and send a new package to Officer Zhang. Tell him to keep an eye on the source of the fingerprint information left." Ah Jiang understood the plan, nodded, and inquired, "What about the Chen family?" Fu Xinqing smiled faintly and reassured him, "Don't worry about the Chen family for now. Focus on taking care of Chen's old lady. Keep an eye on anyone who visits the Chen family, and jot down information about anyone suspicious. If Mrs. Chen has any vital information, she might have hidden it with someone else." In the afternoon, He Yan approached a cleaning lady at a nearby company and asked, "Hey, can I borrow your cell phone to make a call? I rushed out and forgot mine." The cleaning lady kindly handed her the phone, and He Yan quickly dialed a number, saying, "Hello, sweetie, I'm at the mall exit downstairs from your company. Come down quickly." She then handed the phone back to the cleaning lady, thanking her for the help. He Yan waited for a while until a girl resembling herself arrived and casually greeted her. He Yan scolded her for being late and promptly dragged her, saying, "Let's go grab a bite to eat." During their meal, He Yan's friend brought up old memories, saying, "You, girl, have no conscience. Let's not even mention the rest. Back in the day, you used to hang out at Liang Yuan's school park all the time. How many classes did I attend for you, and how many times did I stand in for you? Have you repaid me for all my kindness?" He Yan couldn't help but laugh when reminded of those early years. She took her ID card out of her wallet, placed it on the table, and said, "Take a look at this." Tian seemed puzzled by He Yan's actions but followed suit, placing her ID card next to He Yan's. He Yan looked up at Tian and said, Tian, I need your help with something very important." Tian was initially surprised, then turned her gaze to He Yan, asking, "What's going on? Why do you need my help?" At this moment, He Yan was still somewhat hesitant. It wasn't that she didn't trust her good friend, but she was afraid of involving her in her troubles. However, she had no other choice. Dealing with Fu Xinqing was proving to be extremely difficult, and she lacked the confidence to escape on her own. She needed assistance. Tian Tian dropped her chopsticks onto the table, appearing somewhat impatient. She said, "If you have something to say, just spit it out. You know I'm in a hurry. Don't make me anxious." After pondering for a moment, He Yan spoke in a serious tone, "Tian Tian, I need to go into hiding in Nanzhao and then travel elsewhere. There's someone very powerful after me, and I can't use my own ID card to buy train tickets or stay in hotels. Can you lend me your ID card temporarily? I promise I won't do anything illegal. If it gets lost, I'll get you a new one." Tian Tian was taken aback and asked, "What happened? Who are you hiding from?" He Yan couldn't reveal all the details to her friend, so she simply said, "It's not good for you to know too much." "Tian Tian, I know it's difficult to ask for this favor. If you can help, please do. If you think it's inappropriate, just forget I ever mentioned it." Tian Tian was concerned as she heard this and said, "You've already said it, so consider it done. He Yan, tell me honestly, who are you provoking? Why do you have to run away like this? What about Liang Yuanzi? What's he doing? How did you end up like this?" He Yan knew that her good friend was genuinely worried about her, and it warmed her heart. She replied, "He went abroad. He needs to meet my parents overseas. For now, I have to rely on myself." Tian Tian was becoming increasingly alarmed by the situation and asked, "Who are you running from? If I can't help, I'll talk to my dad and see if he can assist you." He Yan shook her head, saying, "Don't ask too many questions, and I won't say too much. Just do this for me." Tian Tian frowned and asked, "Is this related to what happened 4 years ago?" After hesitating for a moment, He Yan nodded and said, "Yes." Tian Tian couldn't contain her frustration and muttered, "Damn it, I told you not to mess with a godmother, but you didn't listen to me." However, she resolutely pushed her ID card toward He Yan and asked, "Don't say anything more. What else do you need me to do?" "Take the ID card first. You need to get a new one as soon as possible and get a mobile phone number for me, just like yours." He Yan showed her mobile phone to her friend, then handed over an envelope she had prepared before the accident. "Inside is the money for the mobile phone and the key to my parents' house. I've written down the address in detail. You must not contact me. Tomorrow, you can directly deliver these things to my parents' home and place them in the drawer under my bedroom bed, along with your ID card." Tian Tian accepted the key but firmly pushed the money back to He Yan, saying gruffly, "Forget it. I can't let you have my ID card and your phone money. Keep the money for yourself. Don't be silly, and don't use your card once you leave. It will reveal your location." That night, when He Yan returned to her apartment and saw Fu Xinqing, she asked, "How did you know I didn't buy them? Did you have someone follow me again?" Fu Xinqing was momentarily stunned and then burst into laughter. "Did I really need to have someone follow you? You didn't bring back any bags." He Yan casually said, "Those bags on the top shelves were too expensive. Clearly, they're just robbing people. I've taken pictures and sent them to my mom. She'll pick a few and send them back to me." She extended her hand to him and said, "Come here and help me choose." She actually took out the mobile phone and showed him the pictures one by one, eagerly asking, "Which one do you think looks good?" Fu Xinqing was truly unable to judge the aesthetics of these bags. However, when she snuggled up to him with bright eyes, he couldn't help but appreciate the feeling. So, he randomly pointed at 2 bags and said, "These 2. He Yan, however, glanced at them, turned to him with a disdainful expression, and commented, "Your taste is obviously terrible." The room fell into silence for a while. After some time, He Yan turned to Fu Xinqing and asked, "Where will you be celebrating the new year? Will you be here?" Fu Xinqing hesitated for a moment and answered in a low voice, "I'll return to my ancestral home on New Year's Eve and the first day of the new year to pay respects to my ancestors. There will be some family gatherings that I must attend." He Yan remained composed, nodded slowly, and discussed with him, "All right, I'll go back to my parents' place. Their house is too big, and I don't feel comfortable alone. Maybe we can do a video call with them. I'll pretend to be miserable, and when my dad sees it, he'll soften up." He thought for a moment and replied, "For a day and a half, I'll come to see you on the morning of the second day of the new year. Then, we can go out and have some fun." He Yan simply responded with a, and didn't say much. Then, in a soft voice, she whispered in his ear, "Tomorrow is the 29th. I'll go to my parents' house to clean up. Come there in the afternoon to help me hang up the couplets." Fu Xinqing agreed and said, "All right." Then, they both went to sleep peacefully.